The train hissed as it lurched to a stop, steam billowing around its iron frame. Eleanor Whitmore tightened her grip on the worn leather handle of her traveling bag. The moment she had dreamed of, the promise of a new beginning, was finally here. Her heart pounded beneath the confines of her corset as she scanned the dusty platform. A man stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered, his face chiseled from years of work under the sun. Lucas Grady. She had memorized his name, traced it over and over in ink, crafting an image of him through his letters. The words had been brief, gruff but promising. A husband, a home, a future. But now, as his gaze settled on her, something shifted. His lips curled downward. His eyes, a sharp blue, beneath the brim of his hat, turned cold. He took a step closer, arms folded across his chest. "You ain't what I ordered." The words struck like a slap. Eleanor stiffened, clutching the letter in her free hand, the paper crinkling. I don't understand." Lucas plucked the letter from her grasp, scanning it as if seeing it for the first time. Then he scoffed and tossed it onto the dirt at her feet. "Somebody lied to you, lady. Or maybe you lied to me." Heat rose to Eleanor's face. "I didn't." "You look like a church mouse," he interrupted. "Too soft. Too breakable. You wouldn't last a week out here." The platform had fallen silent. The townsfolk watched, their curiosity sharper than knives. A woman in a bonnet whispered to her husband. A young boy pointed. Eleanor's chest tightened. "I came all this way," she said, forcing steel into her voice. "You promised." "I promised nothing." Lucas took a step back, shaking his head. "I need a woman who can work, not some delicate thing who'll faint at the first sight of blood. You're on your own, Miss Whitmore." Eleanor's throat clenched. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "Please," she whispered. Lucas turned, boots scuffing the wooden planks, as he walked away. The crowd began to disperse, disinterest settling in. No one offered a kind word or an outstretched hand. Eleanor remained frozen, her pulse thudding in her ears. She had nowhere to go. No family waiting. No money beyond what rattled in her small purse. A sharp laugh cut through the heavy air. "Well, ain't that something to—" She turned. A man leaned against a wooden post near the saloon, the brim of his hat tilted just enough to cast his face in shadow. He was thick in the shoulders, his coat straining against a belly fed well on other men's misfortune. A cigar smoldered between his fingers. McCready. She had heard the name in passing, owner of a saloon, dealer of flesh, a man who made his fortune from the desperate. "Looks like you're in a bit of a predicament, darlin'," he drawled. Eleanor took a step back, her pulse jumping. "I'll be fine." He chuckled low and knowing. "No, you won't." Two men stepped up beside him, their expressions vacant, but their eyes hungry. "The way I see it," McCready continued, "you got no roof, no job, no prospects. But don't you worry none. We always got room for a girl like you." Her stomach turned. "I'm not." A rough hand clamped around her wrist. She yanked back, panic flooding her veins. "Let me go." The pressure tightened. A sharp yank sent her stumbling forward. Her bag hit the ground, the clasp breaking open. Her meager possessions spilled onto the dirt. Stockings, a small Bible, a silver locket that had belonged to her mother. A boot ground into the locket, pressing it into the earth. Terror coiled around her ribs like a vice. "Help me," she screamed. No one moved. The sheriff stood at the end of the platform, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He turned away. McCready leaned in close, his breath reeking of whiskey. "Ain't no one coming, sweetheart." He wrenched her toward him, dragging her down the steps. Eleanor kicked, twisted, nails clawing at his grip. He laughed. The brothel loomed ahead, its windows glowing with the dull warmth of lamplight. A woman leaned against the doorway, painted lips curving into a smirk. "New blood," she mused. "She'll learn," McCready grunted. Eleanor's pulse screamed. She lashed out, nails raking across his cheek. A bellow of pain. Then, a fist, hard and unforgiving, cracked against her jaw. The world spun. She hit the ground, dust rising around her. Somewhere nearby, a horse snorted. A shadow shifted in the alley, unseen by all but one. Chayton watched. He had been watching since the moment she stepped off that train. He had seen the rejection, the moment the crowd turned cold. He had seen MacCready's greed spark like flint against dry brush. And now, he saw the fight leave her as the saloon doors swallowed her whole. His jaw clenched. This was not his fight. But neither had it been his sister's. And she had been taken just the same. Eleanor came to in a room thick with the scent of cheap perfume and sweat. The dim glow of an oil lamp cast long shadows against floral wallpaper, peeling at the corners. Her jaw ached. Her wrists burned where rough fingers had gripped too hard. She pushed herself upright. The movement sent a sharp sting through her ribs. The door creaked open. The madam entered, her eyes assessing, sharp as glass. "You fight, you get hurt worse," she said simply. Eleanor swallowed, bile rising in her throat. "You'll work or you'll be sold somewhere worse," the madam continued. "That's how it goes." Eleanor's nails dug into the mattress. She had dreamed of a new life, an escape from the confines of expectation. Now, she had walked straight into a cage. She turned her head slightly, catching movement beyond the thin curtains. A shadow. Watching. Waiting. Her heart thudded, a whisper of something close to hope stirring in the darkness. The days blurred together, a haze of dimly lit rooms and forced smiles. Eleanor's jaw still ached from MacCready's fist, but worse was the emptiness creeping into her chest. She had stopped pleading. The women here had told her it wouldn't help. The only way out was to break, or to belong to someone willing to fight for her. And no one would. The saloon stank of whiskey and unwashed bodies. The air buzzed with conversation, men laughing, coins clinking. MacCready sat at his usual table, watching his girls work, his gaze slithering over them like a predator deciding which piece of meat to bite first. Eleanor knew it was only a matter of time before he decided it was her turn. She had tried to run once. The punishment had been swift, a boot to her ribs, a locked room, 2 days without food. She wasn't sure she could survive another attempt. But then she saw him. He sat near the bar, hat low, the flickering lamplight casting shadows across his face. He wasn't like the others. His movements were too still, too controlled. He wasn't drinking, wasn't laughing. He was waiting. The stranger lifted his head slightly, and for the first time, their eyes met. A flicker of recognition. Eleanor's breath caught. The shadow. The one she had seen outside her window that first night. Something passed between them. Something unspoken but sharp as a blade. Then he looked away. She should have felt abandoned. But for the first time in days, she felt something else. Watched. That night, the madam sent Eleanor upstairs. "You've rested long enough," she murmured, fingers tracing the bruises along Eleanor's wrist. "Tonight you work." She didn't have time to beg. 2 hands shoved her through a door, slamming it behind her. A man sat on the bed, back turned. Heavy set, reeking of sweat and ale. Eleanor's stomach twisted. The man grunted, running a hand through thinning hair. "Come here, girl." She backed against the door, heart hammering. The stranger moved. The candle sputtered as he turned, and in the dim glow, she saw the flash of steel. A knife. She didn't think. She ran. His hand caught her wrist, yanking her back. She screamed. Then, glass shattered. The window exploded inward, shards raining down as a dark figure burst through. The man on the bed barely had time to curse before a fist collided with his skull, sending him sprawling. Eleanor gasped, stumbling back. Chayton. He loomed over the unconscious man, his breath steady, his movements deliberate. He turned, eyes locking onto hers. "Move." She hesitated. Then a voice boomed from below. "Someone's in the girls' room." Chayton grabbed her wrist. Now. They ran. The hallway erupted with noise, doors swinging open, footsteps pounding the stairs. Chayton led her through the back corridors, his movements precise, knowing. He had studied this place. A door ahead. The kitchen. Beyond it, the alley. They burst through, into the cold night air. The wind hit Eleanor like a slap, the scent of horses and dust flooding her senses. She barely had time to take a breath before Chayton shoved her forward. "Run." She ran. Behind them, men shouted. A gunshot cracked the night. Eleanor flinched, her feet nearly slipping in the dirt, but Chayton yanked her upright, dragging her toward the stables. A single horse stood saddled, as if waiting for them. Chayton swung up first, then pulled her after him. She barely had time to clutch his waist before he kicked the animal into motion. The town blurred behind them, lanterns flickering, voices rising in anger. MacCready's rage echoed over the rooftops. Find her. Bring her back. They rode hard into the night, the pounding of hooves drowning out the chaos they left behind. The wind whipped Eleanor's hair, her dress torn, her breath ragged. She pressed her forehead against Chayton's back, the warmth of his body the only thing grounding her in the moment. They didn't stop until the lights of the town had vanished, until the only sound was the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves and the distant howl of a coyote. Only then did Chayton pull back on the reins, slowing them to a halt near a dried riverbed. The night stretched around them, vast and empty. Eleanor slid off the horse, her legs trembling beneath her. She pressed a hand to her ribs, her breath shallow. Who are you? Chayton dismounted in one fluid motion, his movements unhurried. He adjusted the knife at his belt before meeting her gaze. You needed help, he said simply. She shook her head. Why? He hesitated. Then, quietly, because no one helped my sister. The words were sharp, edged with something she couldn't quite grasp. She studied him, his sharp features, the set of his jaw, the way his fingers flexed at his sides as if bracing for something unseen. MacCready will come after us, she whispered. Chayton nodded. Yes. A pause. Then what do we do? His gaze flicked to the horizon. The first traces of dawn stretched across the sky, streaks of purple and orange bleeding into the darkness. We run, he said, until we're somewhere he won't follow. Eleanor swallowed. She had nothing. No home, no family, no place to return to. She took one last look in the direction they had come. Then she turned toward the unknown. The fire burned low, casting long shadows against the rock walls. Eleanor sat stiffly, arms wrapped around herself, exhaustion warring with the cold. Chayton moved quietly, securing the horse, his movements precise, practiced. She had stopped asking where they were going. It no longer mattered. What mattered was that they had stayed ahead of MacCready's men, for now. She should have been relieved. Instead, dread gnawed at her ribs. Chayton crouched beside the fire, gaze flickering to her bruised wrists. You should rest. She shook her head. We both know they won't stop hunting me. His jaw tightened. No, they won't. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant howl of wolves. Then, low and certain, Chayton spoke. We finish this. Eleanor studied him. His face, hardened by past losses, was unreadable. But there was no mistaking the resolve in his eyes. They'll come armed, she said. He nodded. So will we. She swallowed, glancing at the rifle he had taken from the saloon stable. She had never fired one before. They took my sister. Chayton's voice was quiet, but edged with something dark. I won't let them take you too. Something shifted inside her. A spark, buried beneath weeks of fear. She wasn't going to be taken. Not again. Chayton watched her, then handed her the rifle. It was heavier than she expected. Point. Breathe. Fire, he instructed. Nothing else. She exhaled slowly, gripping the weapon. Then the sound came. Distant at first. Hooves. She stiffened. Chayton was already on his feet, knife glinting in the firelight. They had found them. MacCready's men crested the ridge, dark shapes against the moonlit sky. 5 riders. Maybe more. The leader reined in first, his silhouette familiar, loathsome. MacCready. His voice slithered through the darkness. You gave us quite the chase, girl. Eleanor's grip tightened on the rifle. MacCready chuckled, dismounting. Now you know how this ends. His gaze slid to Chayton. Step aside, savage. This ain't your fight. Chayton didn't move. She's not going anywhere. MacCready sighed. Shame. He raised a hand. The gunshot cracked through the night. Eleanor flinched, but the bullet missed. A warning shot. Chayton didn't hesitate. He moved fast, drawing his own gun and firing. One of MacCready's men cried out, toppling from his horse. Chaos erupted. MacCready lunged for cover as his men returned fire. Bullets whistled past, kicking up dust. Eleanor ducked behind a boulder, heart hammering. Chayden fired again. Another man dropped. McCready snarled, "Kill him." Eleanor's breath came fast. She clutched the rifle, Chayden's words echoing in her mind. Point. Breathe. Fire. She steadied her hands, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. The shot slammed into a rider's shoulder, knocking him back. Shock jolted through her. She had hit him. Chayden took advantage of the opening, charging forward. His knife flashed, one swift strike, and another man fell. Then McCready was on him. The two men collided, rolling in the dirt, fists swinging. McCready was strong, but Chayden fought like a man who had lost too much to lose again. Eleanor scrambled to reload, hands shaking. McCready drew his gun, pressing it against Chayden's ribs. Eleanor moved without thinking. She swung the rifle like a club, cracking it against McCready's skull. He staggered, cursing. Chayden seized the moment. One strike. The knife sank deep. McCready gasped, eyes wide. Then he collapsed. Silence fell. Eleanor stood frozen, chest heaving. The remaining man, wounded, terrified, scrambled onto his horse and fled. The battle was over. Chayden exhaled, wiping blood from his knife. His gaze met Eleanor's. "You did good." She nodded, though her hands still trembled. McCready lay still. For the first time since this nightmare began, she was free. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying away the last echoes of gunfire. Chayden stepped closer, his presence steady, grounding. "It's over." She let out a shaky breath. "What now?" His gaze softened. "Wherever you want to go." She looked at the horizon, the sky stretching endless before them. Then she turned to him. "Somewhere they won't find me." Chayden nodded. "Then that's where we'll go." And together they rode toward the dawn.
The sky bled gray as snowflakes whispered down like ashes, gentle and merciless. Charlotte's boots barely broke the crusted snow. Her wrists burned from the rope, binding them behind her back. Every stumble earned her a jerk forward, her arm nearly wrenched from its socket. She didn't scream. Screaming had never saved her before. Behind her, one of the men chuckled. "Ain't she quiet now, Thomas? Told you she'd give up fighting. I'll believe that when she stops breathing," the other answered, spitting tobacco into the snow. They were cousins to her late husband, Jared and Thomas Cole, ranchers with broad shoulders, small minds, and mean streaks inherited from generations of bad blood. They were also drunk or pretending to be. Pretending gave them more permission to act like devils. Charlotte had grown, used to the weight of grief. It clung to her ribs like wet wool since Samuel died that spring. He'd been gored by a bull, or so they claimed. He'd always smelled like whiskey and sounded like thunder. Sometimes, in her darker moments, she'd wondered if it had truly been the bull that finished him, or if the land had finally taken back what he never deserved. After Samuel's death, the ranch should have passed to her. That was the law. But the law bent easily in the territories, especially for women with no family, no allies, and no sons. When Jared offered to escort her into town to finalize the paperwork, she'd felt the first prickle of suspicion. When Thomas joined them at the trail fork, she knew something was wrong. Still, she hadn't expected this. Charlotte staggered as her foot caught on a root hidden beneath snow. Thomas yanked the rope again, harder. She hit the ground, cheeks smashing into ice. Distantly, she tasted copper. "You seeing stars yet?" Jared asked. "Ain't you a delicate little thing?" She spat blood, not words. "Pick her up," Thomas muttered. "We ain't far." They dragged her the rest of the way. The cave yawned before them, a dark mouth choked with mist. Trees had thinned, the trail giving way to broken rocks and patches of exposed soil, dark like dried blood. Bones littered the ground, animal bones, most of them. Jawbones, snapped femurs, a cracked skull half buried in pine needles. The wind shifted, and something rank drifted out from the cave. Charlotte's breath caught. Even bound, even bruised, her instinct screamed. This wasn't just abandonment. It was a sentence. Jared gave her a little bow. "Consider this natural justice." "Mountain wolves got no preference," Thomas added. "They'll eat man, woman, or sinner all the same." "Which are you again?" Charlotte asked, voice hoarse. That earned her a slap. Thomas's hand cracked across her face, turning her vision white. She didn't cry. She only blinked once, slowly, and held his gaze. He looked away first. They tied her to a tree just outside the cave's mouth. The bark scraped her back where her coat had been torn. Jared tested the knots like he'd done it before. Maybe he had. Maybe some poor farm girl somewhere still screamed at his memories. When they stepped back, she straightened as best she could, jaw clenched, breath fogging in shallow bursts. "You'll die slow," Jared said. "It's clean." Charlotte laughed. It came out raw, like something scraped from her soul. It wasn't humor. It wasn't madness. It was survival. Clean? There was nothing clean about dying alone in the woods, feeding wild beasts, your name forgotten, your bones gnawed. "You really think this place will bury me?" she said. Thomas glanced at Jared. She's cracked open," Charlotte said. "And if I haunt this mountain, boys, I'll start with you." That unsettled them. Jared spat again. Thomas turned his back too quickly. They left without another word. The sound of hooves faded fast. Then the wind returned, threading itself between trees, howling low and mournful. Charlotte tilted her head back and closed her eyes. No prayers, no sobs, just breath. She didn't expect rescue. She didn't expect mercy. But she wouldn't give them the pleasure of watching her shatter. The cold crept in first, slick and quiet like a thief. It found her fingertips, her ears, her throat. She remembered stories about people freezing to death. How? In the end, it felt like warmth. A trick, a slow drowning in snow. Hours passed, maybe more. Time didn't matter. What mattered was the silence. Until it ended. At first, it was only a sound. A soft pad of paws. Then another. A faint rustle of branches. A snort. A growl. Close. She opened her eyes. The cave had darkened behind her. Dusk was falling fast and thick. The air smelled sharper now. She couldn't explain it, but something had changed. Something was watching. The first shape moved between the trees. Large. Gray. Silent. A wolf. It stepped into the half-light, eyes gleaming amber. Its breath steamed from its jaws like smoke from a furnace. Charlotte held hers. Another emerged behind it. Then another. She was prey. Her body knew it, even if her mind denied it. And yet, she didn't tremble. She burned. Somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the bruises and rope and cold, something ancient stirred. She thought of her mother, of her grandmother, of women who buried children and survived, who stood beside pyres and didn't flinch. She remembered a story her grandmother whispered once of a ghost woman tied to a pine, who tore herself free and walked in a legend. If this is my end, Charlotte thought, let them choke on my bones. The lead wolf growled, low and warning. Its body tensed. Then, a sound cut through the trees. Not loud, just deliberate. A boot against stone. The wolves froze. Charlotte turned her head slightly. Someone was there at the tree line. A shape, tall, still, cloaked in furs. She blinked snow from her lashes. The man stepped into view. He didn't speak. He carried a bow, a quiver over one shoulder. He wore no badge, no emblem, no Western hat. Just braids down his shoulders and a face like carved granite. Weathered, solemn, watchful. One of the wolves growled again. The man knelt slowly, deliberately, and struck flint against steel. A flame jumped to life in his palm. The wolves didn't like fire. They backed into the shadows, one by one, until the cave's mouth held only the dark. Charlotte sagged against the tree, breath ragged. Her vision swam. The man approached without hurry. His eyes never left hers. He crouched, said nothing. Then, with careful fingers, he reached into his belt, pulled a blade, and began cutting the ropes. Charlotte's throat worked, but no words came. He looked up once, his voice quiet, low, deliberate. "You not die today." Her breath hitched, not because she believed him, but because for the first time in days, maybe weeks, someone had said something kind. The ropes fell away. She slumped forward. He caught her gently, like she weighed nothing. As darkness swirled at the edges of her vision, she heard him whisper something in a language she didn't understand. And she didn't care what it meant. All that mattered was that she was still breathing. And someone had come. The cave swallowed the wind. Charlotte's body trembled, not just from cold, but from the exhaustion that crept into her bones like mold, slow, invasive, suffocating. The man who had cut her free moved beside her without a word. He knelt in front of the fire he had built, feeding it with dry sticks and pine needles he'd pulled from a hidden nook. The flames danced between them, casting gold over the stone walls, warming her bruised skin in patches. She sat slumped against the rock wall, her hands cradling a tin cup of water he had given her. Her fingers could barely curl around the metal. Her lips were cracked, raw, but she drank, sipped, like a dying thing relearning how to live. He hadn't asked questions, hadn't spoken beyond those first words, "You not die today." Now, as the fire grew, he finally looked at her. Eyes like polished river stones studied her, curious but not unkind. Beneath the edge of his fur-lined coat, she caught the glint of bone beads. Scars crossed one cheek like lightning over dry plains. His face, though young, held storms. "Name?" he asked, voice steady. She blinked. The word felt like a pebble dropped into deep water. "Charlotte." He nodded once. "Tahu." She repeated it, testing the shape of it. "Tahu." He gave the faintest of smiles. "Close." They sat in silence again. The kind that wasn't awkward, just unhurried. As though neither of them had any reason to rush. As though the mountain itself held its breath for them. After a while, he reached into his pack and handed her something wrapped in hide. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a slab of dark, dry meat. "Pemmican," he said. "Eat slow." It was bitter and chewy and awful. She gagged slightly. He chuckled, a warm, rare sound. "Better than wolf." Charlotte snorted. "I'll take your word." He leaned back on his heels, watching her. "What men did this?" Her jaw stiffened. "Kin of my late husband. Thought I'd get in the way of their land." Tahu's brow furrowed. He didn't press. Instead, he stirred the fire with a twig, making it crackle higher. "They meant you to die slow," he said softly. "Cowards." That word echoed in the cavern like judgment. She looked at him, really looked. His clothes were worn, stitched with care. Feathers tied to his left braid. The smell of cedar and smoke clung to him. He moved like the wind, quiet, sure, dangerous only when crossed. "What were you doing out there?" she asked. "Hunting. For deer." He didn't answer right away. Then, "Sometimes memories." She frowned. "That's not a thing you can kill." "No," he said, "but sometimes you can chase them far enough away." That made her go quiet. He took a strip of meat for himself, chewed it thoughtfully. The fire cast shadows across his face. His eyes glinted in its light like something untamed. "I didn't think anyone would come," she said after a while. "They almost didn't," he answered. "Crows brought me." She tilted her head. "Crows. They talk when men leave wrong things in the snow." Her lips parted. Was that a story or a truth? With him, it might be both. "I didn't cry," she whispered. "Not once." "I know." He said it without surprise, without praise. Just fact. As if he'd seen women like her before. Women who'd been broken but refused to fall apart. The wind outside howled. Inside, the fire held firm. Charlotte leaned her head back against the stone and let her eyes flutter, closed for a moment. The ache in her limbs dulled. Her throat still burned from thirst. Her lips still throbbed, but the silence here didn't feel like death anymore. It felt waiting. Tahu's voice came softer now, almost lost beneath the wind. "You saw them. The wolves." He nodded. She opened her eyes. They were close. "Ready. They would not take you." "How can you know that?" He shrugged. "They knew I would come." Charlotte smiled faintly. "You sure about that?" He met her gaze. "I am." She didn't know what to say to that. The certainty in his voice wasn't arrogance. It was belief. Not in himself, but in the world, in something older and deeper. "Didn't think you people came down this far anymore," she said after a moment. He raised a brow. "You people." She winced. "I didn't mean." "I know," he said. "And still." "I meant Lakota," she clarified. He nodded slowly. "Some still wander. Most stay. I come back to this mountain once each winter." "Why?" He hesitated, then said, "My sister was taken. When I was young. By traders. We tracked them too late." Charlotte looked down. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." That was many winters ago. Still, I return. Listen for her name in the trees. That hit something inside her. A familiar ache. I stayed with my husband longer than I should have, she admitted. He wasn't kind. Tao didn't look surprised. He only waited. He drank. Yelled. Once tried to push me from the loft. Her hands gripped the hide-wrapped meat tighter. I should have left. But I didn't. Not until a bull took him. Sometimes leaving is harder than dying. She looked up sharply. But he wasn't mocking her. He meant it. She took a breath. After that, his cousins came sniffing around. Acted like they were helping. But they wanted the land. They didn't care if I was breathing or buried. They chose the cave. They chose wrong. He smiled again. A rare thing, but it warmed the stones. Outside, the wind died down a little. The hush that followed was sacred. Why'd you help me? She asked. Tahu stretched his legs toward the fire. Because you're still here. She frowned. That's not an answer. It is. They sat with that for a time. Eventually, Charlotte shifted, wincing. Her body was stiff, sore but still hers. Will they come back? She asked. Tao didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, if they do, we will be ready. She nodded. Sleep crept in, slow and silent. As her head dipped, she caught the last flicker of his gaze on her. Not watchful, not suspicious. Protective, curious even, and something else. Respect. That night, in the mouth of the cave, she didn't dream of wolves or betrayal. She dreamed of fire and braids and a mountain wind that carried stories in its teeth. She dreamed of being seen, and somewhere, far below that dream, a single question echoed in a language she didn't know. Why did you live? When morning came, she would start to find the answer. The morning broke without apology. A pale light filtered through skeletal trees, cold and thin as glass. Snow still clung to the rocks, but the sky had cleared, and in that silence, the world seemed both too large and too still. Charlotte woke slowly. Her joints ached, her throat was raw, but she was alive. She blinked up at the cave's stone ceiling, where icicles hung like teeth. The fire had burned low, just embers now, and beside it, Tahu sat cross-legged, eyes closed, hands resting on his knees. She studied him for a moment. He looked carved from earth and bone. Quiet strength in his shoulders, stillness in his breath. When he opened his eyes, she flinched. I wasn't watching you sleep, she said quickly. I was, he replied. She blinked. What for? To see if you'd wake. Charlotte pushed herself upright, grunting. Disappointed? He shook his head once, slowly. Relieved. Outside, the snow crunched beneath a paw, then another. A red fox darted past the mouth of the cave, its tail a flash of fire. It didn't stop, just vanished into the woods. I'm not staying here, Charlotte said. Tao didn't move. You shouldn't walk far. I don't care. I gotta go back. He tilted his head. To what? To what's mine? Silence stretched. They took everything, she said. My land, my name, my voice. And now they'll brag about how they fed me to wolves and laughed around the fire like it's just another story. Tahu looked into the ashes. You think they'll welcome you? I don't need welcome. I just need them to see I'm not dead. He stood, brushing frost from his coat. Then we walk. She wasn't ready. Her legs were stiff, her ribs bruised. But she stood anyway, jaw clenched, eyes set on the trees beyond. Tahu handed her his blanket, then a carved stick. For walking. And hitting if you must. She grinned, despite the ache. I'll aim high. They stepped into the snow. The cold greeted them like an old enemy, wrapping around their ankles, biting at exposed skin. But it wasn't the same cold that had tried to take her. This one she could fight. This one she could outwalk. The path down the mountain was narrow, winding, unforgiving. Tahu moved like he'd walked it 100 times, even with no tracks to follow. Charlotte lagged behind at first, but she forced each step, refused to fall. Hours passed in silence, broken only by birdsong and the occasional crack of ice beneath their boots. She watched the way he scanned the trees, alert, cautious, always calculating. He moved with the stillness of someone who knew the woods spoke, if you listened. How long have you lived out here? She asked during one pause. He didn't look at her. Long enough to know where the lies live. And where's that? under most men's tongues. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Ain't that the truth? Later, they crossed a shallow stream frozen at the edges. Tahu paused, crouched, and placed his palm against a stone near the water. Charlotte waited. You praying? No. Listening. To what? Tracks. She squinted. There's nothing there. There's always something, he murmured. He stood. We're not alone. That stopped her. Animals. He met her gaze. Not the kind with fur. Her grip tightened on the walking stick. They kept moving, faster now. An hour later, she saw movement ahead, figures darting through the trees, just far enough to stir dread. She turned to Tahu. He nodded once. Charlotte's heart pounded, her breath turning sharp. They came without warning. 3 men in worn coats, guns slung lazily at their hips, laughter spilling ahead of them like oil. Bounty hunters, by the look of them. Not local. Hungry-eyed, too clean for miners, too mean for soldiers. Tahu stepped between them and Charlotte before they could speak. One of the men, tall with a reddish beard, grinned. Look what we got here. A real Indian and a ghost. Charlotte didn't blink. Boys, I swear to God, if you think you're robbing me, you're too late. I've already been stripped down to the bones. The man laughed. Not looking to rob you, sweetheart. Just curious how a lady ends up crawling out of the Wolf Mountains with a savage for a guide. Another man muttered. Could fetch something, though. Woman like that. Tied nice and proper. Tahu's voice was calm. Leave now. Or what? No reply. Charlotte didn't breathe. Her fingers curled around the stick. The red-bearded one took a step forward. Didn't hear the lady say she didn't want company. Tahu moved. It wasn't fast. It was precise. An arrow appeared in his hand and disappeared into the man's thigh in one breath. The scream tore through the trees. Charlotte ducked just as a second man raised his revolver. She swung her stick hard and high, catching him across the jaw. He stumbled, and Tahu followed. Knee, elbow, palm, movement so fluid it looked like dancing. But it ended with the man face down in the snow, moaning. The third man ran. Charlotte stood panting, staring at the one she'd hit. Blood dripped from his mouth onto the white ground. Is he dead? No, Tahu said. She exhaled. Good. Then stomped once on his hand. Now he won't be shooting anyone else either. Tahu gave her a look. 2 feathers. She blinked. What? You asked before. If you kill someone, do you get a feather? She stared at him. You get 2. She laughed, full and sharp. And for the first time in days, it wasn't bitter. They left the bounty hunters groaning behind them and continued down the trail. The world grew warmer as they descended. Trees grew taller, closer, and soon smoke curled in the distance. Town! Charlotte stopped when she saw it, chest heaving. She hadn't realized how much she feared this moment until now. The town looked smaller than she remembered, but it was her town, her soil, her name buried in the deeds. Her memories soaked into the wood of the church and the floorboards of the saloon. Tahu stepped beside her. You sure? She didn't answer at first. Then, quietly, I'm not the same woman they buried. He said nothing. I'm tired of being afraid of ghosts, she added. Then go show them who the ghost really is. Charlotte inhaled deeply. The smoke carried hints of horses, oil, and pine. She closed her eyes and whispered, Let's finish this. Tahu didn't follow as she took the first step forward. He only watched, eyes sharp, ready. Behind her, the mountain loomed. Ahead, the town waited. And Charlotte, scarred, bruised, changed, walked into it with a storm in her veins. The town looked like a painting left out in the rain. Familiar lines smeared by time and memory. Charlotte walked down the center of the muddy street, boots dragging just enough to remind herself she was still flesh and blood. Buildings hunched under their own weight, windows staring blankly as she passed. Few souls stirred so early, but those who did stopped and stared like they'd seen a ghost. She didn't blame them. Her coat hung from her like shed skin. Her hair, once pinned and braided, now fell in tangled ropes around her face. Bruises bloomed along her cheekbone, and one sleeve was tied off where it had ripped above the elbow. But her spine was straight, and her eyes were clear, clearer than they'd ever been. Behind her, Tahu lingered just past the edge of town, near the willows. He had said nothing after they reached the outskirts, simply nodded once and melted into the shadows. This was her road to walk, and he respected it. Charlotte stopped outside the saloon. The doors still swung crooked on their hinges. The sign overhead, once gold-leafed and proud, now hung chipped and leaning. She remembered stepping over its threshold as a newlywed, dressed in borrowed lace and wearing hope like a badge. Now, her hand hovered over the door. Inside, laughter. She pushed it open. The warmth hit her first, fire crackling in the hearth, the sour-sweet stink of old beer and damp wool. Cigarette smoke curled like lazy snakes under the ceiling. 3 men leaned around a table near the bar, cards in hand, whiskey in reach. Jared Cole sat among them, his boots kicked up on a crate, half his shirt unbuttoned like he owned the air itself. Thomas stood near the bar, arguing over money with a red-faced man she didn't recognize. The moment they saw her, the room tilted. Jared froze, cards slipping from his fingers. Thomas went pale. Charlotte stepped forward, boots thudding softly across the warped floor. "Morning," she said, voice low and even. "Hope I'm not interrupting." Silence answered. She let the pause grow sharp enough to draw blood. "Problem, boys?" she asked. "You look like you've seen a corpse walk in." Thomas finally found his voice. "You left me tied to a tree like an old dog you didn't want anymore," she said, every word smooth and bitter. "In a wolf cave. In winter." A few patrons stirred, shifting in their seats. Eyes darted from the bruises on her skin to the steel in her gaze. "Must not have tied the knots tight enough," Jared said. He tried to smile. It sat poorly on his face. Charlotte's hand went to her hip. She wasn't armed, but that didn't matter. Her presence was the weapon. "You meant to kill me." "It ain't what you think," Thomas stammered. She looked him dead in the eye. "I think you 2 cowards wanted me gone so you could take what wasn't yours." "You're talking crazy," Jared said. "Ain't no one gonna believe a woman who just stumbles and out of the cold. Rant in." "I have the rope burns," she snapped. "The bruises. The scars. You want to see them?" He hesitated. From the doorway, a voice cut through the room like flint. "She speaks truth." Tahu stepped inside, his presence quiet but undeniable. The room shifted around him. The fire hissed in the hearth. A single feather trailed from his braid. "She was left to die," he said, eyes locked on Jared. "But the land refused her death." The sheriff appeared then, summoned by whispers, or maybe just the weight of justice dragging him from his bunk. His badge caught the firelight as he strode into the room. "What's going on here?" he asked, taking in the tension like a man smelling smoke just before the flames. Charlotte turned to him. "Sheriff, I need you to listen carefully." He looked her up and down. "Ma'am, you look like hell." "I was left for dead by these men," she said, voice firm. "They dragged me into the mountains, tied me to a tree in front of a wolf den, walked away laughing." The sheriff blinked. "That true? She's mad." Jared barked. "You know her, Sheriff. Her husband died. She's grieving, confused." "She's not confused," Tahu said. "She's risen." The sheriff looked between them, jaw twitching. "I was supposed to be buried in snow and teeth," Charlotte said. "Instead, I came back. And I'm not here for pity. I'm here for justice." Someone coughed. A chair scraped back. "Tom," the sheriff asked, "is this true?" Thomas shifted on his heels. We meant to scare her. That's all. We figured maybe she'd just disappear a while. Give the land back." Charlotte stepped closer, her boots now inches from Jared's. "You thought I'd vanish. You thought no one would care." "She's lying," Jared muttered. "She ain't right in the head." "Then why does she stand here and you sit there shaking?" the sheriff asked quietly. Jared stood. "Quick. Foolish. I don't got to sit through this farce," he snapped, reaching for his coat. "I got work to." Charlotte moved first. The stick she carried from the mountain cracked across his knee. He collapsed with a shout, clutching his leg. The room gasped. "Now you know how it feels to be powerless," she said. The sheriff stepped between them. "That's enough." She backed away, breathing hard. The sheriff turned to Jared and Thomas. "I'm placing both of you under arrest for attempted murder. You're lucky she didn't finish the job herself." Jared spat blood. "She's crazy." The sheriff ignored him. Two deputies hauled the cousins away, cursing and howling, their boots dragging through sawdust. Charlotte stood in the silence they left behind, her pulse slowing. The fire crackled again. Someone in the back muttered, "Damn right." Tahu came to stand beside her. "Was that justice?" she asked. "No," he said, "but it's a start." Outside, dawn had bloomed in full, pale gold bleeding over rooftops, washing the mud in soft light. The world looked reborn, and in a way, so did she. They stood there, side by side, as the town stirred. The sheriff returned a moment later. "Land deeds still in your name," he said. "They tried filing claims behind your back, but nothing stuck." Charlotte nodded. "Good. You sure you want to stay?" he asked. "After all this?" She looked down the street, saw the church, the mercantile, the old wooden fence Samuel had never fixed. Then she looked at Tahu. "I might not stay forever," she said, "but I'm going to rebuild what's mine." Tahu didn't speak, but the look in his eyes said he believed her. They walked out of the saloon together, the door swinging shut behind them. She paused on the porch, breathing in the morning. The sun warmed her face, and for once, she didn't feel hunted or hollow. Tahu adjusted his quiver. "You leaving?" she asked. "For now. You always come and go like smoke?" He smiled. "Only when I've seen what I came to see." She touched the carved walking stick he'd given her. "Thank you. You saved yourself," he said. "But you reminded me how." He nodded once, slow and solemn, then handed her a small, carved feather, bone white, delicately etched, for strength. She looked at him, and held back the tears. "You ever coming back?" He looked at the mountains. "Winds always bring stories. I follow them." He turned to leave, then paused. "You walk like someone who won't be forgotten." She smiled. "Good, because I've got a hell of a story now." He disappeared into the trees without another word. Charlotte stood in the rising sun, the town slowly waking around her. She held the feather tight, her jaw firm, her spirit unbroken. The mountains still loomed. So did the past. But from that moment on, she would no longer be remembered as the widow left to die. She'd be remembered as the woman who came back. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because stories like hers, they deserve to be heard.